The mahogany doors of the Preston family mansion felt heavier than usual as I pushed them open that Tuesday evening. 2 days before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, I walked into what would become my worst nightmare. "Zara, darling, come sit down." Mrs. Elizabeth Preston's voice dripped with fake sweetness as she gestured to the ornate chair across from her in the grand living room. Her husband, Richard Preston, stood by the fireplace with his arms crossed, looking like a judge ready to deliver a death sentence. My fiancé Ryan sat on the couch, avoiding my eyes. That should have been my first warning. "We need to discuss something important before Saturday," Mrs. Preston continued, sliding a thick manila envelope across the marble coffee table. "This is a prenuptial agreement." I stared at the envelope like it was a snake ready to strike. "A what?" "Ryan, we never talked about this." "It's just a formality," Ryan mumbled, still not looking at me. "My parents think it's best." Mr. Preston cleared his throat. "Young lady, you need to understand something. The Preston name comes with certain responsibilities. We can't have just anyone accessing our family fortune." "Just anyone?" The words hit me like a slap. "I'm marrying your son, not applying for a job." Mrs. Preston laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Oh, sweet child. Let's not pretend this isn't exactly what this is. You work as a receptionist at some small office. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a 10-year-old car. Meanwhile, our family is worth $50 million. Elizabeth, please," Ryan finally spoke up, but his voice was weak. "No, Ryan, she needs to hear this." Mr. Preston stepped closer, his voice getting sharper. "We've done our research on you, Miss Johnson. You grew up in foster care. No family money. No connections. No education beyond community college. You're marrying up, way up, and we need protection." The room started spinning. These people who had smiled at me during Sunday dinners, who had welcomed me into their home, who had helped plan my wedding, were now treating me like a gold digger. "I love your son," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Love doesn't pay the bills or maintain a reputation," Mrs. Preston snapped. "This prenup is simple. You get nothing if the marriage fails. You have no claim to our properties, our businesses, or our investments. You'll receive a small monthly allowance during the marriage, and if there are children, we'll provide for their education." "Small allowance?" I looked at Ryan desperately. "You're okay with this?" He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. Shame, yes, but also agreement. "Zara, it makes sense. I mean, you have to admit, our backgrounds are very different." Mr. Preston pulled out a gold pen and set it next to the envelope. "You have until tomorrow evening to sign this. No signature, no wedding. We've already paid for everything and we can easily cancel. The choice is yours." "You can't be serious." I stood up, my legs shaking. "You're blackmailing me?" "We're protecting our family," Mrs. Preston said coldly. "Something you should understand given your situation." The way she said situation made it clear she was talking about my background, my foster care history, my humble job. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a charity case who had somehow tricked their precious son into proposing. "I need time to think," I managed to say. "Of course, dear." Mrs. Preston's smile returned, victorious and cruel. "Take all the time you need. You have 24 hours. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the handle. As I reached the threshold, Mrs. Preston's voice followed me. "Oh, and Zara? I do hope you'll make the right decision. It would be such a shame to cancel everything now. All those guests, all that money spent, all those expectations. Think about how embarrassing that would be for everyone involved." I drove home in a daze, their words playing over and over in my head. Just anyone. Marrying up. No claim to anything. The man I thought loved me had sat there and agreed with every cruel word. When I finally made it to my apartment, I collapsed on my couch and stared at the wall. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "I'm sorry it went like that. But maybe they have a point. This protects both of us." Both of us? What was I being protected from? I looked around my small apartment, at my simple life, at everything they had dismissed as worthless. For 2 years, I had let them believe I was just a struggling receptionist who had gotten lucky. I had let Ryan believe he was my hero, my way to a better life. They had no idea who they were really dealing with. My phone rang and I saw my assistant's name on the screen. "Not now, Patricia," I answered. "Ms. Johnson, I'm sorry to bother you, but the Tokyo deal needs your approval tonight, and the quarterly reports are ready for your review. The board meeting is still scheduled for Thursday, and they need to know if you're still planning to attend." I closed my eyes. Patricia didn't know about the wedding. She didn't know about Ryan or his family. As far as she knew, I was just taking a few days off from running Sterling Enterprises, the business empire I had built from nothing over the past 8 years. Send me the reports, I said quietly. I'll review them tonight. Is everything all right? You sound upset. I looked at my reflection in the window. The Preston family thought they were dealing with a desperate woman who would sign anything to keep her fairy tale wedding. They had no idea they had just declared war on someone who had $20 million in assets and the business instincts of a shark. Everything's fine, Patricia. Actually, everything's about to get very interesting. I spent the entire night reading through quarterly reports and financial statements, anything to distract myself from the humiliation burning in my chest. Sterling Enterprises had grown by 30% this quarter, our software division was breaking records, and 3 major corporations were bidding for partnerships with us. But none of that mattered when the man I loved thought I was worthless without his family's money. At 6 in the morning my phone rang again. Patricia, as always, was starting early. Good morning, Ms. Johnson. I have Robert Chen from the legal department on the line. He says it's urgent. Put him through. Zara, we have a problem. Robert's voice was tense. Someone's been asking questions about you. Private investigator type questions. They contacted 3 of our former clients, asked about your background, your finances, your business relationships. I sat up straighter. When did this start? About 2 weeks ago. I only found out because one of the clients called to verify if we had authorized the investigation. What should I do? 2 weeks ago. Right after I had introduced Ryan to some of my college friends at a reunion. Right after Mrs. Preston had started acting strangely, asking pointed questions about my family and my work. Do nothing for now, I told Robert. But document everything. I want to know exactly what they asked and who they contacted. Are you in some kind of trouble? I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. No, Robert. I'm not in trouble. But someone else is about to be. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom closet and pushed aside the casual clothes I usually wore. Hidden in the back were my real work clothes, the designer suits, the expensive shoes, the jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. For 2 years, I had kept this part of my life completely separate from Ryan. It had started as a test. I wanted to know if he could love me for who I was, not what I had. So I got a part-time receptionist job at a small marketing firm and created a whole different version of myself. Simple clothes, modest car, tiny apartment. I told him I was trying to make it on my own, that I was proud and independent. He had seemed to admire that about me. Or so I thought. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my secure business accounts. $23 million in various investments and accounts. Properties in 4 states. A company that employed over 200 people. Patents on software that half the tech world used. The Preston family thought their $50 million was impressive? I had built my fortune from absolutely nothing, while they had inherited theirs from Ryan's grandfather's oil investments. My phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. Hey, I know yesterday was hard. Want to grab lunch and talk about this? I think once you read the prenup, you'll see it's not that bad. Not that bad. He wanted me to sign away any claim to his family's money, while having no idea I didn't need their money. I typed back, sure. Meet me at Romano's at noon. I spent the morning making calls. First to my lawyer, Margaret Torres, who had handled all my business contracts for years. Margaret, I need you to draft something for me, I said, sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee. What kind of document? A prenup. But not a normal one. I want to offer someone everything I own if our marriage fails. There was silence on the other end. Zara, are you feeling all right? That's financial suicide. Trust me on this one. Can you have it ready by this afternoon? If you insist. But I'm strongly advising against this. My second call was to James Wright, the best private investigator in the city. James, I need everything you can find on the Preston family. Business dealings, personal relationships, financial status, everything. And I need it fast. How fast? By tomorrow morning. That's not much time for a thorough investigation. Money's no object. Use whoever you need to use. All right, but this is going to be expensive. James, I'm worth $23 million. Expensive is relative. Another silence. James had handled some discreet background checks for my business, but he had no idea about my real financial situation. I'll get started immediately, he said, his voice now much more professional. My third call was to Patricia. I need you to cancel all my meetings for the rest of the week, I told her. Even the board meeting Thursday? Especially the board meeting. Tell them something urgent came up. Also, I want you to quietly research Preston Industries. Find out everything you can about their financial situation. The construction company? You know them? They've been in the news lately. Financial troubles, I think. Let me check our database. I waited while she pulled up the information. Here it is. Preston Industries has been struggling for the past 2 years. They've had to lay off about 40% of their workforce. Several projects have been canceled due to cost overruns. There are rumors they might be filing for bankruptcy protection. Bankruptcy protection. The family that was demanding I sign a prenup to protect their $50 million fortune was actually broke. Patricia, I want you to look into something else. See if any of their properties are available for purchase. Quietly. Are you thinking about acquiring them? I'm thinking about a lot of things. Just get me the information. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time since yesterday. The Preston family thought they were playing chess with a checkers player. They had no idea the game had just gotten much more interesting. I looked at the clock. 3 hours until lunch with Ryan. 3 hours to decide how much rope to give them before they hang themselves. Romano's was crowded, which was perfect. I wanted witnesses to this conversation, even if they didn't know what they were witnessing. I arrived first and chose a table in the center of the dining room, right where everyone could see and hear us. Ryan walked in 20 minutes late, looking nervous. He had always been handsome in that privileged, never worked a hard day way. Today, though, he looked uncomfortable in his expensive suit. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. He sat down and immediately started playing with his napkin. So, did you think about what we discussed yesterday? You mean what your parents discussed while you sat there like a mute statue? His face flushed red. That's not fair, Zara. I was trying to keep the peace. By agreeing that I'm a gold digger? I never said that. You didn't have to. Your silence said everything. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm but clear. Tell me something, Ryan. In the 2 years we've been together, have I ever asked you for money? Well, no, but have I ever asked you to buy me expensive gifts? No, but have I ever even let you pay for dinner most of the time? He stopped playing with his napkin. You always insisted on splitting things. So where exactly did your parents get the idea that I'm after your money? Ryan looked around the restaurant, clearly uncomfortable with how public this conversation was becoming. Look, they're just protective. They've seen what happens when rich families don't protect themselves. Protect themselves from what? From me working 60 hours a week? From me saving money to pay for my own wedding dress? From me insisting we have a modest ceremony instead of the huge party your mother wanted? You don't understand the pressure I'm under, he said, his voice getting desperate. My parents have expectations. The business, the family name, the social obligations. If I don't do what they want, they could cut me off completely. And there it was. The truth I had been avoiding for months. Ryan wasn't just weak, he was completely dependent on his parents' approval and money. Without them, he was nothing. So you'd rather hurt the woman you claim to love than disappoint mommy and daddy? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. I want you to listen to something. I played back part of the conversation from yesterday, the part where his mother called me a charity case and his father talked about my situation. Ryan's face went white as he heard his own voice agreeing with them. You recorded that? He whispered. I recorded everything. I put my phone away. Did you know your family hired a private investigator to dig into my background? His mouth fell open. They what? 2 weeks ago. They've been checking up on me, trying to find dirt they could use against me. I watched his face carefully. You really didn't know? I swear, Zara, I had no idea. But you're not surprised. He couldn't meet my eyes. They're very thorough people. I signaled the waitress for the check. I couldn't sit here any longer looking at this weak excuse for a man. Where are you going? Ryan asked as I stood up. I'm going to think about your parents' offer. I'll have an answer for them by tomorrow evening, just like they requested. What are you going to do? I looked down at him, this man I had thought I loved, who had just proven he valued his inheritance more than our relationship. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. That evening, I drove back to the Preston mansion. This time I was prepared. I had a tiny recording device clipped inside my jacket, my phone was backing up everything to the cloud, and Margaret Torres was standing by with legal documents. The maid let me into the same living room where they had humiliated me the day before. The whole family was waiting, parents, Ryan, and surprisingly Ryan's sister Nicole and her husband Brad. Zara, sweetheart, come sit down, Mrs. Preston said with that same fake smile. Have you made your decision? I've been thinking about everything you said yesterday, I replied, taking the same chair they had put me in before. About how I'm marrying up, about how different our backgrounds are, about how I need to understand my place in this family. Mr. Preston nodded approvingly. Good. I'm glad you're being realistic about this. Oh, I'm being very realistic. I looked around the room at all their smug faces. I'm curious about something though. You keep talking about protecting the family fortune. Exactly how much money are we talking about? That's not really your concern, Mrs. Preston said stiffly. If I'm signing a prenup, I think I have the right to know what I'm signing away. Ryan's sister Nicole laughed. She has a point, Mother. If she's going to be part of the family, she should know what she's not getting. Mr. Preston puffed up with pride. The Preston family is worth approximately $50 million. We have properties, investments, business interests. It's taken 3 generations to build this wealth. 50 million, I repeated as if I was impressed. That's a lot of money. More money than you'll ever see otherwise, Mrs. Preston added with a cruel smile. And Ryan will inherit how much of that? As the oldest son, Ryan will inherit the majority of the estate, Mr. Preston said. The business, the main properties, the investment portfolio. What about Preston Industries? How's business these days? The room went quiet. Nicole and Brad exchanged glances. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Business is challenging right now, Mr. Preston said carefully. The construction industry has been hit hard by economic changes. Challenging how? That's really not something we need to discuss, Mrs. Preston interrupted. I think it is, I said firmly. If I'm marrying into this family, I should know what I'm getting into, shouldn't I? Brad, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. The company's been losing money for 2 years. We've had to lay off most of the staff and sell off equipment just to pay the bills. Brad. Mrs. Preston snapped. What? She's going to find out eventually. We're basically broke. The only thing keeping us afloat is the property values and some old investments. Nicole nodded. Brad's right. We've been trying to tell you and Dad that we need to make some changes, but you keep pretending everything is fine. I sat back, pretending to absorb this information. So when you say the family is worth $50 million, you're talking about assets, not cash. Assets are still wealth, Mr. Preston said defensively. But assets can lose value. Especially if the business that generated the wealth is failing. The room was getting tense. I could see Mrs. Preston's fake smile starting to crack. The point is, she said through gritted teeth, we still have significantly more than you do. And we intend to keep it that way. I nodded slowly. I understand. You want me to sign a prenup that says if the marriage fails, I get nothing from the Preston family fortune. Exactly. Even if that fortune is mostly tied up in a failing business and properties that might lose value. Our assets are solid, Mr. Preston insisted. I'm sure they are. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at their perfectly manicured lawn. I have a counteroffer. Hey, what? Mrs. Preston's voice was sharp. I turned back to face them. If you want me to sign a prenup, I think it's only fair that it protects both parties. I've had my lawyer draw up an alternative agreement. I pulled out the document Margaret had prepared and set it on the coffee table. What does it say? Ryan asked, speaking for the first time since I had arrived. It says that if our marriage fails, Ryan gets everything I own. My savings, my investments, my properties, everything. Complete protection for both families. They all stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. You don't own anything worth protecting, Mrs. Preston said slowly. I smiled. Don't I? The next morning, James Wright called me at 7 a.m. sharp. I was already awake, sitting on my balcony with coffee, watching the sunrise and thinking about how much my life was about to change. I've got your information on the Preston family, he said without preamble. And it's even worse than you probably think. How bad? They're not just struggling financially, they're about to lose everything. Preston Industries owes over $3 million in unpaid loans. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings on 2 of their properties. And that's not the worst part. I took a sip of my coffee. Go on. Your fiancé has been having an affair with his secretary for the past 6 months. Her name is Brittany Walsh. 24 years old, works at Preston Industries. I've got photos, hotel receipts, text messages, everything. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. 6 months? The affair started right around the time you got engaged. I'm sorry, Zara. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. But strangely, I felt relieved more than hurt. It explains so much: Ryan's increasing distance, his reluctance to set a wedding date, his parents' sudden insistence on a prenup. They weren't just protecting their money. They were protecting their son's ability to leave me for someone they considered more suitable. What else do you have? Mrs. Preston has been seeing a psychiatrist for anxiety and depression. The financial stress is taking a toll on the whole family. Mr. Preston has been secretly meeting with bankruptcy lawyers. And here's the interesting part: they've been quietly trying to sell some of their properties, but they can't find buyers at the prices they need. Send me everything, I said. Photos, documents, recordings, all of it. Already on its way to your secure email. Zara, what are you planning to do with this? I'm planning to give them exactly what they asked for. After hanging up, I spent the morning reviewing James's evidence. The photos of Ryan with his secretary were damning, holding hands at restaurants, kissing in parking lots, entering hotels together. The financial documents painted a picture of a family in complete denial about their situation. But the most interesting discovery was in the property records. The Preston family mansion, the symbol of their wealth and status, was mortgaged to the hilt. They owed more on it than it was worth in the current market. My phone rang. Patricia. I have the information you requested about Preston Industries, she said. And I have some interesting news about their properties. What did you find? 3 of their commercial properties are going up for auction next month. Unpaid taxes and loan defaults. But here's the thing: one of them is the building where Preston Industries is headquartered. They're losing their own office building? It looks that way. The starting bid is only $2 million, which is well below market value. If someone bought it, they could essentially control Preston Industries' ability to operate. I smiled. Patricia, I want you to set up a shell company. Something completely separate from Sterling Enterprises. And I want that shell company to register for the auction. Are you thinking about buying Preston Industries' building? I'm thinking about buying all of it. All of what? Everything, Patricia. I want to buy their entire world out from under them. That afternoon, I met with Margaret Torres at her law office to finalize my strategy. This is either brilliant or completely insane, Margaret said, reviewing the documents spread across her conference table. You want to sign their prenup, expose the affair at your own wedding, and then buy their failing company? That's the basic plan, yes. Zara, this could backfire spectacularly. If you sign that prenup, you're legally giving up any claim to their assets. Margaret, their assets are worthless. They're broke. The prenup is meaningless. But what if they recover financially? I laughed. They won't. Not once I'm done with them. Margaret shook her head. I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I've never had a client plan their own wedding day revenge quite like this. Will it work legally? The prenup is valid, so you can't be accused of trying to steal their money. Buying their properties at public auction is completely legal. Exposing an affair is morally questionable but not illegal. The recording you made in their home might be problematic, but if you don't use it in court, it should be fine. And if they try to sue me? For what? You'll own their company legally. You'll have documented proof of the affair. And you'll have signed the prenup they demanded. They'll have no grounds for any legal action. I gathered up the papers. Then let's do this. Zara, can I ask you something? Why not just call off the wedding and walk away? You don't need their money, you don't need their approval, you don't need any of this drama. I thought about that question. Why was I doing this? It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even really about Ryan anymore. Because for 2 years I let them think I was less than them. I let them condescend to me, patronize me, treat me like a charity case they were graciously allowing into their family. They made me feel small and grateful for their scraps. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I had built my empire from nothing. They're about to learn that you should never underestimate someone just because you think you know their story. Margaret nodded slowly. All right then. Let's burn it all down. That evening I called Ryan. Hey, he answered, sounding hopeful. Have you made your decision about the prenup? I have. I'm going to sign it. The relief in his voice was obvious. Really? That's great, Zara. I knew you'd understand. I understand perfectly, I said, looking at the photos of him with Brittany spread across my kitchen table. I'll see you at the wedding tomorrow. I love you, he said. I hung up without saying it back. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright. I woke up at 5 a.m. in my small apartment, surrounded by boxes I had packed the night before. Not because I was moving in with Ryan, that plan was obviously cancelled, but because I was moving into my real life. Patricia arrived at 6 with coffee and the final paperwork. The shell company is established, she reported, sitting at my kitchen table. Morrison Holdings LLC is now registered and ready to bid at next week's auction. I've also arranged for the wire transfers you requested. Perfect. What about the media? I contacted 3 business reporters who have been following Preston Industries' financial troubles. They'll be very interested in a story about the company being acquired by a mysterious new owner. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Mysterious for now. Are you sure you want to go through with this? It's not too late to just disappear and let them figure out you're not coming. No. They need to see this play out. They need to understand exactly what they lost. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Preston. Don't forget to bring the signed prenup to the ceremony. We'll need it for our records. Even on my wedding morning, she was treating me like a business transaction. I spent the morning getting ready in a completely different way than I had planned. Instead of the modest wedding dress I had originally chosen, I put on one of my real outfits, a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, jewelry that sparkled with real diamonds, shoes that were works of art. For the first time in 2 years, I looked like who I really was. At noon, Margaret arrived with the final documents. Everything's ready, she said, handing me a briefcase. The signed prenup, the evidence of the affair, copies of their financial records, and the acquisition papers for Morrison Holdings. What about the surprise guests? Your board members will arrive at exactly 2 p.m., just as the ceremony is supposed to start. I told them it was a business demonstration they needed to witness. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back at me was someone the Preston family had never met, confident, powerful, wealthy, and absolutely done with being underestimated. The wedding was being held at the Preston Family Country Club, a place where I had always felt out of place in my modest clothes. Today I walked in looking like I owned the building. The club was decorated beautifully, white roses, golden ribbons, everything elegant and expensive. Mrs. Preston had spared no expense, probably seeing it as an investment in her son's future happiness. She had no idea she was paying for her own humiliation. Zara, darling, you look... Mrs. Preston stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. For the first time, I wasn't dressed like the poor girl grateful for their charity. I was dressed like someone who belonged in their world. Different? I suggested. Very different. Where did you get that dress? I've had it for a while. Saving it for a special occasion. Mr. Preston joined us, also staring at my transformation. You certainly clean up nicely. Thank you. I brought the prenup as requested. I handed Mrs. Preston the signed document. She opened it immediately, scanning the pages to make sure I hadn't changed anything. Everything appears to be in order. I'm sure it is. Your lawyers are very thorough. Ryan appeared, looking handsome in his tuxedo but nervous as always. Wow, Zara, you look incredible. Thank you. You look very nice too. I kissed his cheek, tasting the lie. Are you ready for this? More than ready. I can't wait to start our new life together. Our new life. If only he knew. The ceremony was set up in the club's garden, with white chairs arranged in perfect rows and an altar decorated with more roses. About 60 guests were seated, the Preston family's friends, business associates, social connections. My side was smaller, just a few college friends and co-workers from my fake receptionist job. What none of them knew was that 12 very important people were about to join us. At exactly 2 p.m., just as the music was supposed to start, 3 black sedans pulled up to the country club. Out stepped the entire board of directors of Sterling Enterprises, along with Margaret Torres and James Wright. Mrs. Preston noticed them immediately. Who are those people? Some friends of mine, I said calmly. I hope you don't mind that I invited them. But the ceremony is about to start. Actually, I think we should wait a few more minutes. There are some things that need to be discussed first. I walked to the front of the garden and turned to face our guests. My heart was pounding, but my voice was completely steady. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I know you came expecting to witness a wedding, but I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. A murmur went through the crowd. Ryan stepped toward me. Zara, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth, Ryan. Something that seems to be in short supply in your family. I gestured to James Wright, who stepped forward with a manila envelope. Mr. Wright is a private investigator. 6 months ago, he began documenting an affair between my fiancée and his secretary, Brittany Walsh. The murmur became a gasp. Mrs. Preston went white. That's ridiculous. Ryan shouted. You can't just make accusations like that. James opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photographs. These were taken over the past 6 months at various hotels and restaurants around the city. He held up the first photo, Ryan and Brittany kissing in a restaurant parking lot. Then another of them holding hands. Then one of them entering a hotel together. These are fake. Ryan was desperate now. Someone photoshopped these. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I have something even better. I played a recording, Ryan's voice clear as day, saying, I love you too, Brittany. I can't wait until this wedding is over and we can be together properly. The garden fell completely silent except for the sound of Mrs. Preston crying. This is a setup. Mr. Preston shouted. This is some kind of elaborate revenge scheme. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. It is revenge. But not for what you think. I gestured to the board members standing at the back of the garden. I'd like you all to meet the board of directors of Sterling Enterprises. Perhaps you've heard of us? We're the software company that's been dominating the tech market for the past 5 years. Recognition dawned on a few faces in the crowd. Sterling Enterprises, I continued, is currently worth approximately $23 million. And I'm not just an employee there. I'm the founder, owner, and CEO. The silence was deafening. For 2 years, I let you all believe I was a poor receptionist who had gotten lucky enough to catch your son's attention. I wanted to see if Ryan could love me for who I really was, not what I had. I looked directly at Mrs. Preston, whose makeup was now running down her face. You made me sign a prenup to protect your $50 million fortune. But what you don't know is that your fortune doesn't exist anymore. Preston Industries is bankrupt. Your properties are being foreclosed on. Your business is failing. Mr. Preston tried to speak, but I held up my hand. And here's the beautiful part: next week, Morrison Holdings LLC will be purchasing all of your assets at public auction. Everything you thought you were protecting will belong to someone else. Who is Morrison Holdings? Someone in the crowd called out. I smiled. Morrison Holdings is my shell company. By next Friday, I will own Preston Industries, your office building, and 3 of your commercial properties. Mrs. Preston finally found her voice. You can't do this. It's illegal. Actually, it's completely legal. Public auctions are open to everyone. Your son signed a prenup that protects his assets from me, not the other way around. And your family hired a private investigator to dig into my background, so I simply returned the favor. I walked over to Ryan, who was standing frozen in shock. You asked me yesterday if I was ready to start our new life together. Well, I am. Just not with you. I slipped off my engagement ring and handed it to him. Consider this my wedding gift to you, the truth about who you really married. Or rather, who you almost married. I turned back to the crowd. For those of you who are business associates of the Preston family, you might want to know that Sterling Enterprises is always looking for new partnerships. We pay our bills on time, we honor our contracts, and we don't treat our partners like charity cases. Several people in the crowd started whispering, clearly recognizing the business opportunity. This is insane. Ryan finally exploded. You've been lying to me for 2 years. I've been testing you for 2 years, I corrected. And you failed spectacularly. The man I thought I loved turned out to be a weak, unfaithful mama's boy who would rather sign a prenup than defend the woman he claimed to love. Mrs. Preston stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. You planned all of this. This whole relationship was a lie. The relationship was real, I said sadly. My feelings were real. But your son's feelings were conditional on me staying in my place, being grateful for your crumbs, and never threatening your sense of superiority. I gestured to my board members. These people have known me for years. They've seen me build something from nothing, create jobs, solve problems, generate wealth. Not inherit it or marry into it, actually create it. I picked up my purse and briefcase. The wedding is obviously canceled. The reception is paid for, so please enjoy the food and drinks. And Mr. and Mrs. Preston, you'll be hearing from Morrison Holdings lawyers on Monday about the transition of ownership. As I walked toward the exit, Ryan grabbed my arm. Wait. We can work this out. I'll call off the affair, I'll stand up to my parents, I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. Ryan, 6 hours ago you were planning to marry me while sleeping with your secretary. Your parents spent 2 years treating me like dirt while I smiled and took it. And when they demanded I sign away rights to money I never wanted, you sat there and agreed with every word. I gently removed his hand. There's nothing to work out. You showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you. The country club erupted in chaos as I walked away. I could hear Ryan shouting, Mrs. Preston crying, and the guests buzzing with shock and excitement. Several people were already approaching my board members, clearly interested in learning more about Sterling Enterprises. Margaret Torres caught up with me in the parking lot. That was either the most brilliant thing I've ever witnessed or professional suicide, she said, slightly out of breath. Why would it be professional suicide? You just humiliated one of the most connected families in the city. They have friends, political connections, social influence. They had those things, I corrected. But influence without money is just noise. And after next week, they won't have money. Patricia was waiting by my car with a tablet and a grim expression. We have a problem, she said immediately. Preston Industries just filed an emergency injunction to stop the auction. They're claiming the bidding process is fraudulent. I took the tablet and read through the legal filing. They're trying to claim Morrison Holdings doesn't have the financial backing to complete the purchases. Can they do that? Margaret asked. They can try, I said, already mentally switching into business mode. But Morrison Holdings accounts are fully funded. We have bank guarantees, verified assets, everything the auction house requires. What do you want me to do? Patricia asked. Set up a press conference for Monday morning. I want every business reporter in the city there. It's time for Sterling Enterprises to step out of the shadows. My phone started ringing immediately. Reporters, business contacts, even some of the wedding guests. Word was spreading fast. Miss Johnson? An unfamiliar voice made me turn around. A young woman in an expensive dress was approaching nervously. Yes. I'm Nicole Preston, Ryan's sister. Could I speak with you privately for a moment? I looked at Margaret, who nodded. I'll wait in the car. Nicole led me to a quiet corner of the parking lot, away from the chaos still unfolding at the country club. What you did in there? She started, then stopped. I should probably hate you right now. But everything you said was true. The affair, the financial problems, the way my parents treated you. I've been watching it all happen and feeling sick about it. She looked back toward the club, where we could see Mrs. Preston gesticulating wildly at a group of guests. My parents are living in a fantasy world. They refuse to admit how bad things have gotten. The business is dying, we're drowning in debt, and instead of fixing it, they decided to blame you for threatening their security. Why are you telling me this? Because I work for Preston Industries too, and I have 43 employees who are going to lose their jobs when we go under. If you're really buying the company, I want to know if there's any chance you might keep some of us on. I studied Nicole's face. Unlike her brother, she seemed genuinely concerned about other people, not just herself. What do you do at the company? I'm the operations manager. I've been trying to streamline our processes, cut costs, improve efficiency. But every suggestion I make gets shot down because it would mean admitting we're in trouble. What would you do differently if you had complete control? Nicole's eyes lit up. We could focus on smaller residential projects instead of trying to compete for massive commercial contracts we can't afford. We could partner with local suppliers instead of using expensive materials from out of state. We could actually make money instead of just trying to look impressive. I pulled out my business card and handed it to her. Morrison Holdings will be conducting interviews for all existing employees next week. If you're serious about making changes, I'd like to hear your full plan. Really? Nicole, I didn't buy your family's company to destroy it. I bought it because it has potential that's being wasted by pride and bad management. She looked at the card, then back at me. Can I ask you something? Did you ever really love my brother? I thought about that question. I loved who I thought he was. But that person either never existed or disappeared the moment he had to choose between me and his family's approval. He's weak, Nicole said simply. He always has been. Our parents created a monster, someone who expects everything to be handed to him but has no idea how to work for anything. What about you? I'm tired of watching my family destroy everything they touch. If you'll have me, I'd like to help you rebuild what they tore down. We shook hands in the parking lot while behind us, the Preston family's world continued to crumble. One more thing, Nicole said as I walked toward my car. The secretary, Brittany? She's been embezzling money from the company accounts. Small amounts, but it's been going on for months. Ryan doesn't know. I stopped walking. Do you have proof? I've been documenting everything, hoping to eventually take it to the police. But with everything else falling apart, it seemed pointless. Email me everything you have. If Morrison Holdings is taking over the company, we'll need to clean house completely. As I drove away from the country club, my phone rang constantly. The story was already hitting social media, and by evening it would be on the business news. The mysterious CEO who revealed her identity at her own wedding was exactly the kind of story that captured public attention. But I wasn't thinking about the publicity. I was thinking about the look on Ryan's face when he realized that the woman he had cheated on, the woman his parents had tried to humiliate, was worth more than his entire family fortune. That evening, I sat in my apartment, my real apartment, the penthouse I had been hiding for 2 years, and opened a bottle of champagne. Not to celebrate the end of my relationship, but to celebrate the beginning of my real life. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding Preston Industries into something worthy of the name. I would create jobs, honor contracts, and prove that sometimes the best revenge is success. But tonight I was just enjoying the fact that I never had to pretend to be less than I was ever again. Monday morning arrived with a media frenzy I hadn't quite anticipated. The parking lot of Sterling Enterprises was packed with news vans, reporters, and curious onlookers. The story of the bride who revealed herself as a millionaire CEO at her own wedding had gone viral over the weekend. Patricia met me at the employee entrance with a stack of newspapers and a concerned expression. "Page 1 of the business section in 4 different papers," she said, handing me the publications. 3 interview requests from major business magazines, and someone started a hashtag about you on social media. I glanced at the headlines: the $20 million bride, CEO's wedding day revenge, from receptionist to business mogul, the ultimate plot twist. What's the hashtag? Hashtag never underestimate women. It's trending. I smiled. That wasn't what I had intended, but it wasn't terrible either. "Are you ready for this press conference?" Patricia asked as we rode the elevator to the top floor of my building, a floor Ryan had never seen. I've been ready for 2 years. The conference room was packed. I recognized most of the business reporters, but there were also entertainment journalists and even a few national news crews. This story had legs. I walked to the podium wearing one of my real business suits, the kind I had hidden in the back of my closet during my entire relationship with Ryan. Today I looked like exactly what I was: a successful CEO worth $23 million. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and confident. "I'm Zara Johnson, founder and CEO of Sterling Enterprises. I'm here today to clarify some misconceptions about Saturday's events and to discuss the future of Preston Industries." A dozen hands shot up immediately. "Ms. Johnson, is it true that you've been living a double life for 2 years?" I prefer to think of it as conducting a long-term character assessment. For personal reasons, I chose not to reveal my business success to my former fiancé and his family. That choice proved to be very illuminating. "What did you learn from this assessment?" I paused, thinking about how to phrase this diplomatically. "I learned that some people will treat you very differently depending on what they think you can do for them. I also learned that true character reveals itself under pressure." "Are you really buying Preston Industries?" Morrison Holdings LLC, a company I control, will be participating in next week's public auction of Preston Industries assets. This is a legitimate business transaction, not a personal vendetta. But surely there's some element of revenge involved? I looked directly into the cameras. Revenge would be destroying Preston Industries out of spite. What I'm planning is restoration. The company has good employees who deserve better leadership and stable paychecks. It has potential that's been wasted by poor management and financial denial. "What about your relationship with Ryan Preston?" "That relationship ended Saturday afternoon. Mr. Preston made choices that are incompatible with the kind of partnership I value." A reporter in the back raised her hand. "Ms. Johnson, there are reports that Ryan Preston was having an affair. Did that influence your decision to expose your identity at the wedding?" "The affair was certainly a factor, but not the primary one. The primary factor was realizing that I was in a relationship based on deception, not my deception, but the deception of people who claimed to love me while systematically undermining my self-worth." "Can you elaborate on that?" I thought about Mrs. Preston's cruel smile, about Ryan's weak agreement with his parents' assessment of my worth, about 2 years of being treated like a charity case. For 2 years, I was told I should be grateful for the opportunity to marry into their family. I was treated as less than, spoken to as less than, and expected to accept less than. The prenup they demanded was just the final insult in a long pattern of disrespect. "And now you're buying their company?" "Now I'm buying a company that has potential. The Preston family's ownership will end because they've mismanaged it into bankruptcy, not because I'm taking revenge." "What's next for you personally?" I smiled, and for the first time since Saturday it felt genuine. "What's next is that I stop apologizing for my success. I stop hiding who I am to make other people comfortable. And I focus on building something meaningful instead of pretending to be someone I'm not." After the press conference, I returned to my office to find an unexpected visitor waiting. Ryan sat in the reception area, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Patricia, please give us a few minutes," I said. She nodded and left, closing the door behind her. "Nice office," Ryan said, looking around at the space he had never seen. "Very different from that little apartment you showed me." "I still have the apartment. I kept it as a reminder of where I came from. Along with the fake job and the modest car and the carefully constructed lies about your entire life." I sat down across from him. Ryan, why are you here? Because I need to understand. Were any of your feelings real? Was any of our relationship genuine? All of my feelings were real. That's what made this so painful. Then why didn't you just tell me the truth? I looked at this man I had thought I loved, trying to find a way to explain something he would probably never understand. Because I needed to know if you could love me without my money. And the answer very clearly is no. That's not fair. Ryan, when your parents demanded I sign a prenup giving up all claim to your family's wealth, you agreed with them. When they called me a gold digger, you sat silently. When they treated me like I should be grateful for your attention, you let them. I was trying to keep the peace. You were protecting your inheritance. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. The affair with Brittany, it wasn't supposed to mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant you were hedging your bets, keeping your options open in case the poor girl wasn't worth the trouble. I was going to end it after the wedding. Were you? Or were you going to keep both of us, the wife who gave you social respectability and the girlfriend who made you feel powerful? He couldn't answer that question, which was answer enough. What happens now? He asked. Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without your family's money or mine. You find a job that doesn't depend on family connections. You learn how to be a person instead of just someone's son. And if I do that? If I prove I can change? I shook my head gently. Ryan, I'm not a rehabilitation project. I'm not going to wait around hoping you'll become the man I thought you were. So this is really over. This was over the moment you chose your parents' money over defending me. Everything since then has just been paperwork. He stood up, looking around my office one more time. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the affair, about my parents, about all of it. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo the choices you made. After he left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the city I had conquered while pretending to be someone else. For the first time in 2 years, I felt completely myself. No performance, no carefully constructed persona, no hiding. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole Preston. Emergency meeting at Preston Industries. The lawyers are here, the employees are panicking, and my parents are threatening to fire everyone rather than let you buy the company. Can you help? I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Time to save 43 jobs and show the Preston family what real power looked like. Preston Industries headquarters was in chaos when I arrived. Employees stood in small groups in the lobby, whispering anxiously. Security guards looked confused about whether they should let me in or throw me out. And from the conference room, I could hear Mr. Preston's voice shouting about lawsuits and legal action. Nicole met me at the elevator. It's bad, she said immediately. Dad's threatening to liquidate everything rather than let you buy it. Mom's calling every lawyer in the city trying to find a way to stop the sale. And the employees are terrified they're all going to be unemployed by Friday. What about Ryan? He's in there with them, but he's not saying much. I think Saturday broke something in him. We walked toward the conference room where I could see the Preston family huddled with 3 men in expensive suits, their lawyers, presumably. Mrs. Preston saw me first. How dare you show your face here? This is still our building. For 4 more days, I replied calmly. Then it belongs to Morrison Holdings. Mr. Preston stood up, his face red with anger. We'll see about that. We're filing an emergency injunction to stop this fraudulent sale. On what grounds? One of the lawyers, a thin man with nervous energy, spoke up. Market manipulation, predatory business practices, intentional interference with family relationships. None of which are actual legal violations, Margaret Torres said, walking into the room behind me. Market manipulation requires securities fraud, which hasn't occurred. Predatory business practices require monopolistic behavior, which is impossible when acquiring a failing company. And intentional interference with family relationships isn't a thing. The Preston family's lawyer looked uncomfortable. We're exploring all options. Explore away, Margaret said, settling into a chair with a thick file folder. While you're doing that, we'll be completing the legal acquisition of assets being sold due to non-payment of debts. Mrs. Preston turned her fury on me. This is all about revenge. You're destroying our family out of spite. Mrs. Preston, your family destroyed itself. I'm just cleaning up the mess. We would have recovered. Business goes through cycles. You owe $3 million to creditors, I interrupted. Your company hasn't turned a profit in 18 months. You've laid off 60% of your workforce. You're 3 months behind on property taxes. This isn't a cycle, this is a collapse. We just needed more time. You had 2 years. You spent it denying reality instead of fixing problems. Ryan finally spoke up. What happens to the employees if you buy the company? I looked around the room at the faces of people whose livelihoods hung in the balance. Morrison Holdings will honor all existing employment contracts. We'll conduct interviews with every employee to assess their skills and determine their role in the restructured company. Nobody gets fired for their previous management's mistakes. The relief in the room was visible. What about management positions? Nicole asked. Those will be earned based on competence, not family connections. Mr. Preston slammed his hand on the table. This is our company. 3 generations of Prestons built this business. 3 generations of Prestons also drove it into bankruptcy, I replied. Sometimes legacy isn't enough. One of the employees, a middle-aged woman I didn't recognize, stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing this? I mean, you could buy any company you want. Why save ours? I thought about that question. The simple answer was revenge, but that wasn't the whole truth anymore. Because good people shouldn't lose their jobs due to bad leadership. Because this company has value that's being wasted. And because sometimes the best way to prove your worth is to build something instead of just tearing it down. Mrs. Preston's voice was bitter. How noble of you. Mrs. Preston, you had 2 choices when your company started failing. You could have admitted the problems and worked to fix them, or you could have denied reality and blamed everyone else. You chose denial. I'm choosing solutions. And our family? What happens to us? I looked at the 3 Prestons, the parents who had treated me like dirt, and their son who had betrayed me. You'll receive whatever the court determines you're entitled to after your debts are paid. If there's anything left, it's yours. There won't be anything left, Nicole said quietly. The debts are bigger than the assets. Then you'll start over. Millions of people do it every day. Mr. Preston's lawyer tried one more approach. Ms. Johnson, surely we can reach some kind of arrangement. A partnership, perhaps? The Preston family retains some control. No. You won't even consider. The Preston family's management style created this crisis. Keeping them involved would be like hiring an arsonist as a fire chief. Margaret stood up and opened her file folder. The auction is Wednesday morning. Morrison Holdings' bid will be submitted at 9 a.m. If you want to submit a competing bid, you have until then to secure financing. She placed a document on the table. This is a financial disclosure showing Morrison Holdings' ability to complete the purchase. As you can see, the funds are readily available. Mrs. Preston picked up the document and her face went white as she read the numbers. $23 million in liquid assets, she whispered. That's just what's readily available, Margaret added helpfully. Ms. Johnson's total net worth is considerably higher. The room fell silent as the Preston family finally understood the scope of what they were dealing with. All this time, Mrs. Preston said slowly, you were worth more than we are. All this time you treated me like I was worth nothing, I replied. That says more about you than it does about me. Ryan looked up at me with something that might have been understanding. You tested us, he said. For 2 years you tested whether we would love you or just what you could give us. And you failed. We all failed. I nodded. Yes, you did. As I walked toward the exit, Nicole caught up with me. The interview for the operations manager position, when should I schedule it? You don't need an interview, Nicole. You've been trying to save this company for months while everyone else was in denial. The job is yours if you want it. Even though I'm a Preston? You're not responsible for your family's choices. You're only responsible for your own. She smiled for the first time since I had met her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do. As I left Preston Industries for the last time as an outsider, I realized something had changed. The anger was gone. The need for revenge had been replaced by something more productive. The determination to build something better from the ruins of their pride. Wednesday morning, Morrison Holdings would acquire Preston Industries. By Friday, we would begin the work of turning a failed family business into a successful company that actually served its employees and customers instead of just feeding the egos of its owners. It was going to be the most satisfying project I had ever undertaken. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what used to be Preston Industries, now renamed Phoenix Construction. The walls that once displayed portraits of 3 generations of Preston men now showed photos of our completed projects and our employee recognition awards. Nicole approached with a stack of quarterly reports, her face bright with excitement. We did it, she said, setting the papers on my desk. First profitable quarter in 3 years. We're not just breaking even anymore, we're actually making money. I flipped through the reports, noting the numbers that told the real story. 15 new contracts signed. 23 employees hired back. 0 customer complaints in the past month. What made the difference? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Treating people like human beings instead of assets, Nicole replied. Paying fair wages, honoring our commitments, focusing on quality work instead of maximum profit. The transformation had been remarkable to watch. Once we removed the toxic leadership that had been poisoning the company culture, everything else fell into place naturally. Employees who had been demoralized and fearful became productive and innovative. Clients who had been frustrated with poor service became enthusiastic advocates. Any word from your family? I asked. Nicole's expression darkened slightly. Dad's working construction for one of our competitors. Mom got a job at a department store. Ryan. What about Ryan? He's been calling me constantly, asking if there's any way he can get his job back. Or any job here, really? I wasn't surprised. Ryan had discovered that his Princeton degree and family connections meant nothing when he actually had to work for a living. What did you tell him? That Phoenix Construction hires based on merit, not family connections. If he wants to work here, he can submit an application like everyone else. And? He won't do it. His pride won't let him apply for an entry-level position at a company that used to belong to his family. Pride. It was always pride with the Prestons. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Your 3 p.m. is here early. Conference room B. I looked at Nicole. What's my 3 p.m.? A potential new client. Major residential development project. Could be worth $2 million if we get it. I headed to the conference room, expecting to find another developer or property management company. Instead, I found a familiar face from my old life. Dr. Michael Harrison, I said, genuinely surprised. I didn't expect to see you here. Michael had been one of my college professors, a man who had encouraged my business ambitions when everyone else told me to be more realistic. He was also someone who had known me before I became successful, someone who had seen potential when I was just a struggling student working 3 jobs. Hello, Zara. Or should I say Miss CEO who shocked the world at her own wedding? I laughed. Just Zara is fine. What brings you to Phoenix Construction? I'm developing a housing project for first-time homebuyers. Affordable but well-built homes for people who are working hard but don't have family money to fall back on. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sounds like exactly the kind of project we'd be interested in. Tell me more. For the next hour, Michael outlined his vision: a community of starter homes designed for young professionals, single parents, and anyone else who needed quality housing at reasonable prices. It was everything the old Preston Industries would have sneered at: small profit margins, working-class clients, practical rather than prestigious. It was perfect for Phoenix Construction. I have to ask, Michael said as we wrapped up the meeting, why did you really save this company? You could have started your own construction firm or bought a more successful company. I thought about that question, the same one everyone had been asking for 6 months. Because sometimes you need to prove that things can be done better. The Preston family thought success meant stepping on other people. I wanted to show that success could actually lift other people up. And the revenge aspect? The best revenge is living well. The company is profitable, the employees are happy, and I'm building something meaningful. Meanwhile, the people who tried to diminish me are discovering what their pride is actually worth in the real world. Michael smiled. You know, I always knew you'd be successful. But I never imagined you'd be this wise about it. Wisdom comes from making mistakes and learning from them. The Preston family taught me what not to do. As Michael left, I realized how much my life had changed in just 6 months. I wasn't hiding who I was anymore. I wasn't pretending to be less than I was or more than I was. I was simply being myself, a successful businesswoman who cared about building things that mattered. My phone rang. Margaret Torres. I have news about the Preston family lawsuits, she said without preamble. All dismissed. All dismissed. The judge ruled that Morrison Holdings' acquisition was completely legal and that the Preston family's claims of fraud were baseless. Sover Zara. They can't touch you or the company. How did they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Mrs. Preston made some threats about ruining your reputation, but she doesn't have the influence she thinks she does. Mr. Preston tried to blame his lawyers for giving him bad advice. And Ryan? What about Ryan? Ryan asked if there was any possibility of a reconciliation. I was quiet for a moment, processing that information. What did you tell him? I told him that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But I said he should ask you himself if he wants a real answer. He won't ask. That would require admitting he was wrong, and the Preston family doesn't do that. What if he does ask? I looked out my office window at the city where I had built my life, my real life, without having to pretend or compromise or make myself smaller for anyone else's comfort. Then I'll tell him the truth. That I'm happy now. That I'm with someone who knew my worth from the beginning. And that I wish him well, but I'm never going backward again. Someone who knew your worth from the beginning? I smiled, thinking about the man I was having dinner with tonight. Someone who had worked alongside me for 3 years, who had seen me make difficult decisions and celebrated my successes, who had never once asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. His name is Daniel Chin. He's my business partner at Sterling Enterprises, and he asked me out 6 months ago the day after my wedding that wasn't. And he told me he'd been wanting to ask me out for 2 years, but he thought I was taken. Turns out the best relationships happen when you're not looking for someone to complete you, but when you're complete already and you find someone who complements that completeness. Sounds like you've learned something valuable from this whole experience. I've learned that you should never let anyone convince you to be smaller than you are. And that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to accept treatment that's beneath your worth. As I hung up the phone, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I belonged, running a company that made a difference, in a relationship built on respect and genuine affection, surrounded by people who valued me for who I really was. The Preston family had given me a gift, though they'd never realize it. They had shown me what I didn't want, which helped me recognize what I did want when I found it. Tomorrow, Phoenix Construction would break ground on Michael's affordable housing project. Next month, we'd be announcing our expansion into green building technologies. And next year, we'd be one of the most respected construction companies in the region. Not bad for a company that was supposedly worthless 6 months ago. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, I sat in my office reading the cover story of Business Weekly magazine. The headline read, "From Ashes to Empire, How Zara Johnson Built a Construction Dynasty." The article was everything I could have hoped for, not just about my business success, but about the importance of treating employees well, building sustainable communities, and proving that you could be profitable while still being ethical. Patricia knocked on my door, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a huge grin. "Have you seen today's stock prices?" she asked, setting the bottle on my desk. "Sterling Enterprises hit another record high? That and Phoenix Construction's valuation just exceeded $50 million. You officially own more than the Preston family ever did, and you did it in 12 months. I shook my head in amazement. "It's not about the money, Patricia. It never was. I know that. But it's still satisfying, isn't it?" Before I could answer, Nicole appeared in my doorway. "Zara, you need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. On the screen was a news article, "Preston Family Patriarch Files for Personal Bankruptcy." I read through the article quickly. Mr. Preston had exhausted his savings trying to fund his failed lawsuits against Morrison Holdings. Mrs. Preston's department store job wasn't enough to maintain their lifestyle. They were losing their family mansion and moving into a small apartment. "How do you feel about this?" Nicole asked quietly. I thought about that question. A year ago this news would have felt like victory. Now it just felt sad. "I feel sorry for them," I said honestly. "Not because they lost their money, but because they never learned anything from losing it." "What do you mean?" "They're still blaming everyone else. According to this article, their problems are the fault of predatory business practices and a vindictive former daughter-in-law. They still don't understand that their choices created their situation." Patricia poured 3 glasses of champagne. "Well, their loss is everyone else's gain. Phoenix Construction just hired 15 more people, and Sterling Enterprises is expanding into 3 new markets. We toasted to success, but I found myself thinking about second chances and whether people could really change." My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Dinner at 7? I have something important to ask you." I smiled, my heart doing that little skip it always did when I heard from him. Daniel Chin had been the perfect antidote to the Preston family drama, steady, supportive, genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings rather than my bank account. "Something important?" I texted back. "Very important. We're something nice." An hour later, I was getting ready to leave when my receptionist called. "Miss Johnson, there's someone here to see you. Says his name is Ryan Preston." I paused, one arm in my coat sleeve. "Did he say what he wanted?" "He says it's personal and important." I looked at Nicole, who had overheard. She shrugged. "It's your choice," she said. "But for what it's worth, he looks terrible. Like he hasn't slept in weeks. Send him up." "But I only have 5 minutes." Ryan walked into my office looking like a different person. Gone was the confident, entitled man I had almost married. This version was thinner, wearing an off-the-rack suit instead of designer clothes, and carrying himself like someone who had learned what humility felt like. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, not sitting down. "What do you want, Ryan?" "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say sorry and expect forgiveness." I gestured to a chair. "You have 5 minutes." He sat down and took a deep breath. "You were right about everything. About me being weak, about my family being toxic, about the way we treated you. For the past year, I've been trying to figure out how everything went so wrong, and the answer is that we never valued the right things. Okay. I loved the idea of you, the sweet, grateful girl who would make me look good and never challenge me. But I never loved the real you because I never bothered to find out who the real you was." He paused, looking out the window at the city lights. "I've been working construction for the past 6 months. Real construction, not managing other people's work. My hands are covered in calluses, my back aches every night, and I make about 1/10 of what I used to make. How's that working out for you? It's the first honest work I've ever done in my life. And you know what's strange? I sleep better now than I did when I was living off my family's money." I checked my watch. 3 minutes. "I'm not here to ask for another chance. I know that ship has sailed, and honestly, I'm not the same person you fell in love with anyway. I'm here to ask if there's any way I could work for Phoenix Construction." I blinked, surprised. "You want to work for me?" "I want to work for a company that treats people well. I want to learn how to build things instead of just inheriting them. And I want to prove to myself that I can earn something through my own efforts. Ryan, this isn't some movie where the humbled hero gets redeemed through hard work. This is real life with real consequences." "I know that. I'm not asking for redemption. I'm asking for a job." I studied his face, looking for signs of the old entitlement, the old weakness. Instead, I saw something I had never seen before: genuine humility. "Why should I hire you?" "Because I know construction now, not just the business side but the actual work. Because I understand what it feels like to be treated like you don't matter, and I'll never treat another employee that way. And because I'll work harder than anyone else to prove that I deserve to be there." "What about your pride? Are you really prepared to take orders from people you used to consider beneath you?" "My pride cost me everything that mattered. I'm done letting it make decisions for me." I looked at this man who had betrayed me, who had chosen his family's money over our relationship, who had sat silently while his parents humiliated me. He was asking for something I had never expected: not forgiveness, not another chance at our relationship, but simply the opportunity to earn an honest living. "There's an opening for a junior project manager," I said finally. "It pays $40,000 a year, which is probably less than you spent on clothes last year. You'd be supervising crews, managing timelines, dealing with difficult clients. You'd report to Nicole." "Your sister?" "Your sister. Who has more construction experience than you do and who earned her position through competence, not family connections." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And Ryan, if you take this job, you're just another employee. You don't get special treatment, you don't get to trade on past relationships, and you don't get to complain if the work is hard. I wouldn't expect anything else." I handed him a business card. "Send your resume to HR. If Nicole approves your qualifications, we'll consider your application. Thank you, Zara. For everything." As he walked toward the door, he paused. "Can I say one more thing?" "What?" "I heard about you and Daniel Chin. I'm happy for you. You deserve someone who sees your worth." After he left, I sat alone in my office, processing what had just happened. The man who had once taken me for granted was now asking me for a job. The family that had treated me like a gold digger was now broke while I was richer than they had ever been. But strangest of all, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The need for revenge had been replaced by something more complex: a recognition that people could change, that consequences could teach lessons, and that sometimes the best victory was simply building a better life. My phone rang. "Daniel, are you ready for dinner?" he asked. "More than ready. I'll tell you about my interesting afternoon over appetizers. Looking forward to it. See you soon." As I left the office, I passed the wall of photos showing Phoenix Construction's completed projects: affordable housing developments, community centers, renovated schools. These were the things we had built from the ashes of Preston Industries' failure. But the real victory wasn't in the buildings or the business success or even the personal vindication. The real victory was in becoming someone who could look at her former tormentors with compassion instead of anger, who could offer second chances while maintaining her boundaries, who could build something meaningful from the ruins of other people's mistakes. A year ago, I had been a woman pretending to be smaller than she was to test whether she was loved for herself. Today, I was a woman who knew her own worth and refused to accept anything less than she deserved. Tomorrow, Phoenix Construction would break ground on another affordable housing project. Next week, Sterling Enterprises would announce a new partnership with a green technology company. Next month, Daniel and I would probably be planning a future together built on mutual respect and genuine love. And someday maybe Ryan Preston would prove that people really could change. But even if he didn't, I would be fine. I had learned the most important lesson of all, that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but building a life so good that their opinions become irrelevant. The Preston family had taught me what I didn't want. Daniel had shown me what I did want. And Phoenix Construction had proven that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the ugliest situations. As I walked out into the night air, heading toward dinner with a man who had loved me from the beginning, I realized that I had finally become exactly who I was meant to be, not despite the humiliation and betrayal I had endured, but because of how I had chosen to respond to it. Sometimes the best stories aren't about getting the guy or getting the money or getting revenge. Sometimes the best stories are about getting yourself back.